I was in the 342nd Infantry Regiment of the 86th Black Hawk Division.
Okay, and
World War II.
what did the Black Hawks do?
They're unusual in that they served in both Europe and in the Pacific. In Europe, it was the closing of the Ruhr Pocket just after the breakthrough of the Germans in December of '44, and then in the Pacific, the atomic bomb was dropped while we were on our way to San Francisco, and they sent us anyhow, and so we ended up in the Philippines.
But you didn't get too close to Japan yet?
No, but we would have been in the second wave into Tokyo Bay. So when I taught history, I used to pose to classes, was it the right decision to drop the bomb? And I would usually end by quoting Fussell, who wrote a book called The Boys' Crusade, and he wrote an essay called Thank God for the Atomic Bomb. He was a second lieutenant in the infantry.
And we glorify war, you know, we talk about it like it's a valiant fight, and really it is, and men behave valiantly. But the wars that we talk about, explain the hell that we talk about too. Give us some sort of a sense that it's not all black and white and it's not easy.
No, I think wars should be commemorated, not celebrated. And I think the way the commemoration of the Civil War was done was exactly what I would mean.
Have we commemorated enough? Remembered enough?
Oh, in my opinion, yes, but that would depend on the individual's feeling.
I joined the Navy to see the sea.
And you saw it already.
I sure did. And I wouldn't even think of putting us in the same category as the men who fought in the First World War. But it was really more than a police action.
Well, tell me about some of your experiences. You were in peril sometimes?
I would say that anybody that worked on the flight deck was imperiled constantly. Yeah. I'll never forget the day we sent off all the planes on a mission, and of course then we had a little time to ourselves waiting for the planes to return. So we'd be in the coffee shack, bumming more or less, and the first thing you know, you heard a horrible crash. An airplane was coming through the flight deck, trying to get us.
Yeah, but it was one of our planes, right?
Yes. Thank God it was one of our planes.
Mr. Geis made reference to the fact that we probably have commemorated sufficiently in his opinion. Do we call attention to our soldiers and our wars properly and enough, in your opinion?
Well, you see, when you're young, you can't wait to get into battle. So, what happened is the ship I was on, the USS Leyte, we were more or less used as a troop ship. Take the boys over there, you know. And I'll tell you, we took a lot of Marines over there, and they couldn't wait to get over there. They thought that as soon as they got over there, they'd put the clamps on these Koreans, never dreaming that the Chinese would would become a part of the battle. And boy, oh boy, when the Chinese came over, aided by the elements, I'm speaking of the weather in particular, it was unbelievable how cold it would get. After the Chinese invaded, I believe it was Sewell. A few of us Navy guys were there having a couple beers, and the first thing you know, a couple guys are calling out my name. And I'm looking around to see who's calling out my name. Well, lo and behold, after a while I'm looking at their mouths moving, and they were the ones that were calling out my name. I'm telling you, they look like old men.
There's soldiers your age.
They aged so quickly, it was unbelievable.
Anything else you want to tell me today?
Well, a lot of people wonder about why these soldiers of the Civil War era were so wanted to get into the battle. Well, I can safely say that I witnessed the same boys, and they were never the same.
It's life-changing.
Life-changing.
Thank you very much.
They became old men.
They became men in a big hurry. Okay.
I'm a Canadian by birth. I was in the finance department attached to the Air Corps. I spent 3 years in the finance office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I never saw anybody in action or anybody shoot at anybody.
First of all, this is an easy question. Can you spell your last name so when we use this on the air?
Freeman.
Now, you didn't see any action and were stateside the whole time?
I spent the entire time this side.
Okay. One of our guests just mentioned that maybe we have commemorated, talked about, remembered, honored battles sufficiently. Maybe it's still a question. Do you think we talk about these times enough, or should we do a little more?
I don't have an opinion.
Okay. Tell me about the stories that you've heard from some of these men. What do you think when you hear these stories?
Well, I think a lot of them had a tougher time than I sure did.
Okay. Why did you join the military?
I got drafted.
Did you want to go over?
I didn't want to go anywhere.
You didn't even want to be where you were then.
Huh?
You didn't even want to be there then.
No.
Okay.
Well, I was getting old. I'm now 100, so I was getting old when this happened.
You live here now, correct?
I live here.
And where did you live prior to here?
Nova Scotia, Canada, Boston, New York, and where this air base was.
Okay. You know this, why Northumberland, Pennsylvania, although it's a wonderful place, how did you find out about this wonderful place?
My one son went to Bucknell and one son went to Susquehanna.
Good. Well, lucky us. Well, I'm very glad you're here. Thank you. We're considering military action in Syria right now. What do you think when you hear our president ramping up saying we have got to get militarily involved?
I don't know enough about the story to have an opinion and to say anything.
Could there be reasons we should get involved in some conflicts?
Possible.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anything you want to tell me? Maybe I didn't ask you.
No, I have to leave shortly.
Okay. When's your 101st birthday?
Oh, it's next May. I just made 100.
Wow. Happy birthday in advance.
U.S. Navy.
And tell me your whole story.
The only thing I think is interesting is a lot of people have the misconception the Japanese suicide pilot was dedicated, and that they all were, and that is not true. There were some of them that had misgivings about getting in this plane and crashing it for the Emperor. And there are several occasions that I know of personally where that suicide plane would come in and land between a couple of destroyers, get out of the plane as fast as he could, and hope that nobody in the plane beat him over the head with an oar, because that happened several times. Anyway, when they were picked up by a destroyer, the destroyer had no brig to keep them in. So they were transferred the next day or a few days afterwards to a carrier, the carrier like I was on, the Enterprise, or a battleship, which had a brig, and the Marine contingent there was in charge of the prisoners. And the Marines, they treated them royally. And I don't think they ever had a harsh word. And they wore Navy fatigues, got Navy food, and once a day, if the Marines could, they would take them back to the fantail, and they'd do exercises and throw a baseball around, maybe wrestle. And the Marines taught them, when an officer comes by, and you can tell by the bars on his shoulder who he is, you stand at strict attention, and you salute him. Just salute. As you're done, you will give him the age-old expression. and words to that effect, which I won't repeat.
Isn't that funny?
So this went on, and the sailors were around there, and the Marines got a hell of a big kick out of it. But the officers, I think that recently graduated from Annapolis, they felt that was demeaning and an insult to the officer corps. So the captain, once a week, he put out a bulletin, and he said that the harassing the officers has got to stop, and that ended it.
All right. Tell me about the brotherhood that you had with your fellow sailors and all soldiers, too. Tell me about the connection you have to the men here today.
It was close. It was close.
I don't have that. I'm not a vet, so I don't have it. What's the difference? Explain this connection.
Suffered the same kind of treatments, food, lousy pay. Well, we had a lot in common.
But you gained by all that?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
What did you gain?
More of an understanding of human nature. All brotherhood.
The brotherhood of all soldiers everywhere.
That's right.
I was a sailor, and these are all my heroes. I didn't get into the service till 1954, after college, and I spent 2 years on this destroyer, and the nice thing about it all is nobody was shooting at me.
Okay. Mr. Davies mentioned this brotherhood, this camaraderie, or I asked him about it, he answered the question. What's your opinion about this connection that you have with these fellows you call heroes? Oh,
yeah, they were like your brothers. You didn't know them before, but you soon got to know everybody else on the ship, and they were your brothers.
Explain what that means. I have a brother. You know, we spend holidays together.
Well, you were concerned about them. You were concerned about their health. Now, I wasn't there in the shooting time, but I can understand how they felt about it. And I can just have a glimmering of it all, because I wasn't there when they were shooting.
You were post-Korea, pre-Vietnam.
Well, I guess it was at the end of yes, Korea, the end of Korea.
Okay.
And I put my 2 years in after college and enjoyed it all.
Yeah, tell me, do you keep in touch with some of your fellow sailors now?
Not a one. I tried to, but I was unable to get in touch with some of them.
Okay. What do you miss that? You know, the fact that you don't have that connection with the folks that you spent that 2 years with?
Well, I wonder about them. I very definitely wonder about them, and said prayers for them. Yes, there's a real close connection.
Do we talk about our armed forces enough, in your opinion? I mean, every so often it's kind of a brought up issue, like on Veterans Day or Flag Day or Memorial Day, whatever it is. Do we talk about it enough? Do we teach our young people enough?
I don't think we can ever talk enough about these heroes. I know, well, that's how I feel about it. We never can talk enough about them. I thank them so much.
I was drafted in 1951 after I got out of college because I didn't have any more deferments left.
And
So I was in Korea during the Korean War.
you're one of these guys that wanted to be anywhere else but there.
But there, absolutely.
But tell me about that. You went willingly and unwillingly.
I went reluctantly. I wasn't thrilled about it because I just started a new job, my first job after. So I was ready to start my career, but I had to put it on hold, I guess.
And how many years were you in the service?
I was into 53, just after, got discharged just after the Korean armistice or ceasefire or whatever you want to call it. So.
And tell me about your service.
Well, I was overseas. I went to basic at Fort Lee, Virginia, in the quartermaster, and I went to a leadership school there. I was thinking about going to OCS, but they told me I had to re-up for another 3 years, and so I said, "The heck with that." So, and then I tried to get in trying to do everything to avoid from going overseas, but they were shipping everybody over then, and so I tried to get in the quartermaster corps because of my education, and I got in, but then they deferred all transfers, so I couldn't do that, and so I wound up going to Korea. So,
Any regrets
about
your service or your decision making?
no, I don't have regrets. I regretted it, I guess, at the time, but I don't regret it now, and I had good experience. So I was. Got into Korea, and I was assigned to a military police outfit, and we were in charge of the prisoners of war. We had the charge of the prisoner of war camp, which was located south of Pusan in a little island called Kojido, and it was totally all prisoners, and there must have been, they say, a 500,000 prisoners there at one time, both Chinese and North Korean, and so it was a little touch and go there. They captured the colonel in charge of the camp. They captured him and got him in one of the compounds, and he was in there for over a week. That was really a touchy situation. So,
Scared?
Well, yeah, I was, because they say almost 500,000 prisoners there, and there was about 3,000 GIs in the place. That was it. And so they finally brought in a General Bull Boatner, his name was, and he came in. He was really a tough guy, and he came in there and brought in the 101st Airborne. They brought in the 82nd Airborne and a tank regiment. They surrounded the compounds and got them under control, and it was really something to. I mean, you had to sleep with your weapon all the time, and because you might wind up getting on we slept on rubber cots and on rubber rafts, and we might have to take that raft and start floating in the water. So
And so while you were there, you were thinking, I wish I was somewhere else.
oh yeah, yeah, it wasn't fun. Really, it was scary.
But you did your time.
Yeah.
Did your service.
Yeah.
Tell me about the pride that you feel afterward for having made that sacrifice and help.
Well, I have a certain amount of pride, yeah, but and I'm not sorry I did it. Now I had experience. I got to Japan a little bit, saw a little bit of Japan. I liked Japan and what I saw there, and I got through it okay.
You ever go back to Japan?
No, never did. No, I liked it though. It was very nice.
And I was drafted for 2 years in the Army from 1953 to 55. I never went overseas, so I am honored to be among these men here.
Well, and you say you're honored to be among them. Tell me this connection you have to them.
Well, I think anybody who's in the service respects and honors those that have done combat duty. And a lot of my friends have gone through a lot.
Tell me about the connections you've kept with some of your fellow soldiers. Do you keep in touch?
I've been fortunate enough to be with, see every now and then one or two of my people, mostly from out in the Michigan area. I took basic out at Camp Breckenridge in Kentucky and then finished up my tour down at Fort Benning. And both places I met wonderful people. And I'm fortunate that I didn't see any combat or anything.
What years were you in?
53 to 55.
Were you nervous that you would be sent over at some point?
I no more than anybody else, and no less than anybody else. But I was fortunate enough to get out before, or the war was over before I was sent over.
You got out. How often did you talk about your story since then?
Well, I really don't have too much to talk about.
You don't have a big story.
No.
Do you ever talk to young people about military service, or have you had chances to talk about military service to other people?
No, not really. No.
You think we should? Is there more work to do to sort of spread the word?
You know, the draft was a good thing when I was growing up, and I don't think it hurts anybody to give a certain number of months or years to their government as long as it's done right.
Community service of some form.
Some form.
Okay, great, thank you.
And I was drafted in 1957, the post-Korean era, into the U.S. Army, and served from 1957 to 1959.
That's the year I was born, incidentally.
One of the things that they used to tell you is, you never volunteer for anything in the military. I did basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and the company that I did my basic with were all draftees except two. And those two were regular Army who had enlisted in the Army, and they were assigned to the Adjutant General School. The day that we went for our orders, I was assigned to field artillery in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and then from there we would have gone to Korea. The two regular Army people, in order to go to the Adjutant General School, you had to be able to type. And neither one of them could type, so the person in charge of dispersing the order said, "Can anybody type here?" So I raised my hand. And so he pointed to me and he said, "You go to the Adjutant General School in Indianapolis, and this fellow will go to Fort Sill, Oklahoma." So I went from there to Adjutant General School and then was assigned to 3rd Army Headquarters in Atlanta, which was good duty.
Were you glad most of the fighting was over?
Yes. When you talk about career changing, obviously I went to Atlanta. I had a teaching certificate. So while in the military, I taught night school at the United States Federal Penitentiary in Atlanta. And from there got involved in adult corrections, which basically was my career choice. I was superintendent of two state prisons here in Pennsylvania. I was superintendent of the Dallas prison up in Wilkes-Barre for 10 years. I was superintendent at Graterford prison. And then during the Thornburg administration, the then Bureau of Correction, which was under the Attorney General, which when it became an elected office, the Bureau had to go back under the governor's office. So the legislature passed a law elevating the Bureau to the Department of Corrections, which it is today. And I was the first Secretary of Corrections in Pennsylvania.
Wow, congratulations. We've talked about young people a couple times today. How much should we talk about this? How much should we impose these stories or volunteer them? How much should this be brought up?
Well, I think it's important that you learn about one's past and the history, because that kind of gives some indication of where we may go in the future. And I think that it's important that young people know the history of this country, know about the wars and both the good and the bad in terms of the impact on the eventual outcome of history.
What do you think of this idea, 2 years of compulsory service, draft or military or otherwise?
I think it was a good idea. I think the 2 years of military service for every young person would be a very good idea. I think it teaches you discipline, it teaches you order and organization, and I think it's very important. I think that one of the things that you find out with inmates in prisons, for example, most of them never had a sustained job, never learned about work or how to hold down a job. And that had they had that opportunity in their younger years, finish school, mandatory military service, would added a lot of positive structure to their lives.
I served in the U.S. Navy. They were going to draft me right out of high school, and I didn't think much of the Korean Peninsula and all their mountainous terrain, so I joined the Navy. I'm not sure my mother ever forgave me, but my dad finally did.
What year was that?
That was 1951, right out of high school.
And where did they send you?
They sent me to Bainbridge, Maryland, right down at Haverty Grace for my basic training. And from there, they shipped me to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, where the USS Toronto was stationed. That was its home port. And from there, we pretty much went around the world a couple of times. That ship, while I was on it, they said steamed at least 400,000 miles. So if I joined the Navy to see the world, they did a pretty good job.
You circled the world 4 times there, or more. You could do it 12 times. Tell me about your Navy service. What was the best thing about it? What was the worst thing about it?
Well, I was on an aircraft carrier, and I was a gunnery department, and I was in gunfire control. And my assignment was 7 decks above the hangar deck. So I had a ringside seat to what went on above decks every day, watching those airplanes, and I watched the transition from prop planes to jet planes. So it was a fascinating time. It was a little brutal sometimes, because there's a big difference between the prop-driven aircraft and jet-propelled aircraft. We got to Korea 2 weeks before they finally agreed to the ceasefire. And the very first night we were off the North Korean coast, at 3 o'clock in the morning, we went to general quarters. And here they had 2 boats loaded with explosives that they tried to float out of the harbors, unbeknownst to, the Navy, which was very common, I understand, at least early in the war. And of course, we had a ring of destroyers around us, and they promptly blew them out of the water. But it was quite an exciting time, and that's as close as I came to Korea, 6 miles offshore.
What else do you want to tell us? You haven't told a lot of people What else do you want to tell us?
Well, I think you were talking about spending time in the military. I agree with these gentlemen here. I think every young person, male or female, should spend at least 2 years in federal service of some type. Not necessarily the military, but it would mature them a great deal and just might get them ready for what else is going to come at them in their lives. It made me grow up. It made me become a responsible, hopefully, individual.
What about 2 years, maybe not in the military, but some other community service? Could that help people same way, same discipline maybe?
Absolutely. The pre-World War II CCC from President Roosevelt was a good example of that. And all he was doing was trying to prepare the young men who eventually would have to go at a time when this country of ours was trying to isolate themselves from another world war in Europe. But it made all of those fellows semi-military, and their induction into the Army and the military was maybe slightly less traumatic.
What else do you want to tell us?
Well, it's been a great life. I'm lucky. I've had the pleasure of seeing a lot of the world. Every person in this country should manage to spend some time overseas and see what the rest of the world lives like. They just might appreciate their home better.
I enlisted in the Navy when I came out of high school. Sent me to Great Lakes. I played a tuba in the band. They wanted me to go to musician school. I was a young fella, and I said, nah, I want to go win the war. So they sent me to Frisco, and I got aboard ship, and we went into Okinawa on April 1st, 1945. It was Easter Sunday back home. We picked up a bunch of Army boys in Panama and took them in, and most of those boys never came back. We were at general quarters most of the night for 30 days because of kamikaze, and they were after us. And of course we came back home, and I ended up married my high school sweetheart, and that's my story.
Well, let me be frank about this. You came home. You know a lot of guys that didn't because of this battle. How often do you think about that? You don't get much time to talk about it, but how often do you think about it? How often do you remember all that part?
Quite a bit.
And what is gained by war or this or?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Tell me more about that. And of course, I mentioned over there that our president's interested in getting involved militarily in Syria. So what do you think when you hear the president saying it's time to get involved?
I think we should stay the heck out. We're into it enough now in Afghanistan and Kuwait.
Okay. These guys talked about a brotherhood. Tell me this connection that you have to other soldiers.
They're all gone, most of them, so I really don't have a connection.
Okay. How old are you?
87.
87. Okay. So yeah, you're the young guy here. So
Yeah.
Among the World War II
Yeah.
generation, you're the young guy. Talked to Stan Seipel recently. We did an interview with Stan Seipel, and one of the things he said is he faults his generation for not talking enough about their experiences. You know, he said they went all of their lives and never took it up again. Do you think soldiers need to talk more about their experiences?
Some of them.
Okay. Why should we do that? And why should we listen, and why should you tell us?
Well, it's part of our lives.
Okay. All right. What else would you like to tell me today?
Nothing.
You didn't even want to tell me that stuff. No. You're part of the quietest generation.
Yeah, I guess. The greatest generation.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. But we have some outreach and some work to do to spread the word. Anything else you want to tell us?
I agree with these other gentlemen. I think the young people today should spend a couple of years in the service.
So tell me about that. Mandatorily, or well, it is voluntary now. So a mandatory community.
Yes, because the young people today, I don't know.
But that's what they said about you then.
Probably. Probably.
Back in 1940, they were saying, "What's going to happen to this guy? He'll never amount to nothing."
Yep.
That's what they said about me. So I don't know if they were right or not.
I enlisted in right out of high school. I took a test and was able to get in Army Security Agency.
When was that?
Back in 1948. Yeah. And went to school for that. I took a basic at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, all airborne basic, all but the jump. And then went to school for the ASA. And I learned diddy-daw-dit and to read tape. I had to take 25 words a minute without a mistake, and I had to learn to read tape. And I worked at Bent Hill Farms. It was a huge barn. The silo was a staircase. The basement was the power units. The first floor was the radios, which I worked on. And the second floor was the tape, which I read tape. And we'd get a message and send it up to the crypt room, and they'd decode it and have it ready within 10 minutes. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was very good.
Why did you enlist?
I had nothing else to do, and I had a job at 25 cents an hour, and I paid that to my parents for food and board, so I thought, shucks, I might as well go into service. So I went over and took that test, and I said, well, that's better than infantry. So I went and had that experience, and I'm glad I did it. It was very, very good, especially the basic training. That was very good. Yeah.
Why was all of that good?
It really made a man out of me. It built me up. It was fabulous. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yeah. But did you know my son Steve, the helicopter pilot?
Does it ring a bell, Steve Reese?
Steve Brungard.
Oh, Brungard, I'm sorry. I've got to keep up here. Brungard. It doesn't ring a bell to me.
Well, in the 72 flood, he flew around here and took a radio operator up to WKOK.
That was Than Mitchell. I just talked to Than around here. So.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so there's military training that you can use the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Do you tell me about how that military life, you said it was good,
Oh, yeah.
how it made you a better person?
It just made a good man out of me. Made me strong and ready to take things no matter what. Yeah.
2 years for everybody?
It would be good. It would be good.